all roads have led us to this, Leinster versus La Rochelle in the 2022 final. What a game. Game. A replay of last year's semi-final, which was won by 9 points by La Rochelle, and won in rather a dominant physical fashion last time these two sides met. So despite the fact that Leinster are bookies' favourites, and they are, and I've seen some ludicrously ridiculous odds going on this particular game, for considering it's a 2-horse race in which the underdog won the last matchup between these two, and yet I've seen ridiculously short odds on Leinster.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there was a lot of that chat was made in advance of the Leinster Toulouse game as well, and the bookies were proven right on that one. Not to say that I'm counting chickens or anything. I'm going to be at this game. I'm going to be going to Marseille. Very excited about that. So I'll be delivering you live reports, potentially. Well, no, but reflective reports with potentially some footage of myself there at the big game, back in the boys in blue, because it's not every year that your side gets to play in a European final.
No, these are worth cherishing.
It's not every year you get to back a team like this. I mean, they are everyone's favourites for a reason. Leinster, they've been playing some absolutely staggeringly good rugby on the offence and defence at the moment. It's been a brilliant run, really, all season long, right back to the start of the season when Sexton came back from, obviously he wasn't in that Lions tour. He came back into the team and Leinster were just purring away nicely. They went straight into November with Ireland, had that sensational run where they beat the All Blacks. Then it went off, did the job in the kind of the hodgepodge group stages, came into the Six Nations, had a great Six Nations, were undone by France, learned some lessons there, but they've come back, they haven't missed a beat. They're just playing test level, really high quality offense, and sneakily really, really high level defense that no real club offense has been able to break down all year. And so naturally enough, I think the interesting thing to start off with to talk about is, if you're Ronan O'Gara, if you're La Rochelle, what are you doing to undermine and get after this Leinster team? Well, and I think go on.
I think part of it is impose yourselves physically, which is what they were so successful with last year. It's set piece. It's kind of the very, very core of the game, trying to deny that ball. It is slow down the ruck ball. They are very combative in the breakdown. They're very effective. They had a field day against Racing last week, just turning over any ball that they wanted, pretty much. As soon as there was an isolated breakdown, they need to be on that to slow down and pilfer ball from Leinster is pivotal for La Rochelle, but also they're going to have to place kick a bit better. They're going to have to kick generally a bit better than they did in that semi-final, one would think. They're going to have to protect the pill themselves a little bit better if they're going to want to try and exert some pressure with ball in hand. So there's going to be improvements that you can cite. Like, one of the good things about performing so under the par they've set for themselves in the semi-final, and with Leinster looking as imperious as they do, is that from Roger's point of view, there's no motivation needs to, and you can point at all of those things and just be like, we know we're going to have to be much better than we have been, and that should be able to get the boys up for that kind of level of performance.
I mean, there's obviously the game is multi-layered and multifaceted, and there's kicking dynamics and so many different dynamics to it, but your four main areas, I suppose, are your kicks, your set piece, and your offense and your defense. And starting with Leinster, like Leinster's main strengths ahead of everything else, the quality of what they're doing on offense and defense at the moment is staggeringly good. You have to start by looking at that offense. I mean, Toulouse have a good jackal game. They got one solid steal off Julien Marchand, but for the most part, Leinster and their rhythmic offense with their multi-options were shutting down the turnover options simply by occupying all of the defense with so many options, picking a preferable one, winning that contact, and then instantly through ball presentation and footwork and just one forward hitting the ruck, presenting the ball and going again, and right away they're in their shape. It's a glorious thing to watch them do. And I think when you're looking at, like, Toulouse had the most success towards the end of the game when they bull rushed the pullback option, attacked the pocket of Sexton, and I think that's what you have to do if you're La Rochelle here. I think you have to shut down the outside and say, you're just force them to win it on the inside. Force them to, Sexton is going to be running that, and whether it's Hugo Keenan as well or Gary Ringrose in some certain phases, they want to get that pullback going. They want to get that second pod involved as early and as often as possible, so they can have that kind of pivot position where Sexton or one of the backs can pick the killer pass. What you need to be able to do is to just shut that down and force them to kind of keep working the inside, keep taking that sort of check down option.
And I think force them into the path of Aldrit or someone else at the breakdown.
Correct.
Ensuing.
And big Will Skelton, if he's back in time, I know him and Antonio are doubts. Obviously they'd be huge if they could get them both back and firing,
and would be huge if they can't, if they lose both of them. That's a massive effect.
It is a different game if you bull rush the pullback option, as in send a shooter in his direction, force Leinster to occupy within their first pod, and you're winning big contacts with big tackles. That is how you probably, like, you look at France in the Six Nations against Ireland, unsticking them with just big slow tackles on the inside, making everything messy and slow, and then all of a sudden, you know, there isn't the room, there isn't the space for Sexton, and all of a sudden Leinster are kicking, and it's a different game. A different game. So I think the defense is the first port of call, and the nuggets are there in terms of how you can shut it down, but it starts with, as often as possible, taking Sexton out of the game. Sexton's the guy who gets it purring. If you can just limit his possessions and punish him for even receiving a pass by having a big Dante or someone like that in his face, that's a huge part of the blueprint for just narrowing up what Leinster are trying to do. Leinster have been so good at working Sexton into space. I mean, they keep flooding the inside channels with all kinds of options. They'll work 1 phase, 2 phase, 3 phase, even off first phase once or twice. They've had moves where they go flying off the top of the line out to 12. Gibson Park is looping around, and Sexton is all of a sudden so wide he's practically in the 13 channel. But even then, I think you should obviously be switching within your roles, but there needs to be someone shooting up on Sexton, because he is the guy who Leinster want to get in the ball, and when he's in the ball, he's the guy who's going to make the killer decision. He's not the guy who's going to run through and Damien McKenzie you or Bowden Barrett you, but once the ball gets into his hands, the right option's coming, and then the danger men are on the ball in the right positions. Get after him. Mark him. Do not let him get involved.
Also want to try and manhandle people like the very impressive Josh van der Fleer and Keelan Doris and these kinds of guys. Just kind of get on top of them in those contacts and slow them down, because the ball playing skills of the forwards is what creates that space. It's very tough to defend, but if you can be dominant, if you can sit them down, if you can get them moving backwards, then that's going to be the first port of call for La Rochelle. On the offensive point of as well, they're going to have to tidy up significantly with the ball, because you're going to have to score. Like Leinster, even if you defend really, really well, Leinster are going to score some points. So La Rochelle are going to need to score in this final to win it, and they're going to do so against this Leinster defence, which you can get distracted trying to stop Sexton and all this from the fact that Leinster's defence is very, very good.
Correct.
And puts you under a lot of pressure.
That's what happened to Leicester. I mean, Leicester did a great job defending Leinster, and it's something that Racing can take the nugget of, but Leinster in the tight areas had enough quality, and you suspect they will have enough quality to get to the reasonable tally of, I think it was 20 anyway in the first half. And it was only, I think, 23 overall, wasn't it? I think 23 points, and that was by being clinical enough to grab a couple of tries in the red zone. You have to expect that if you're La Rochelle. But what the flip side was Leicester doing all that work on Leinster's offense. They couldn't break down their defense, and it's a curious one. Leinster defended so well against Toulouse. They defended the edge freakishly well, to the point where, like, Toulouse were doing the KBA thing. Dupont was getting multiple touches on the ball, and then he or Ntomac were seeing space on the outside, space that they would do so well to exploit. They were flicking the ball over there with their huge quality of pass. But Leinster, in a kind of a nearly a dare I say it, a Springbok kind of way, that they were staying so alert on the defensive end, and the scramble defense was shutting down the edge consistently. And every time Toulouse tried to get to the edge, get Labelle involved, it just wasn't there. By the time it got there, Leinster scramble defense, Ringrose or Henshaw was there. They all swarmed, they all made the tackles. Then they bring the pressure up on the inside, and in the end Toulouse were just wilting and dropping the ball and turning it over, and La Rochelle on semi-final form would be doing exactly that.
They're going to need, it's going to be a big performance from whoever's at halfback as well, because I think Carbarlo is out with a broken hand. He was icing that at the end of that game, and he has been the tempo setter for that. Like, granted, he had a poor game, I thought, even up to breaking his hand in that semi-final, but he has been their 9, and he has been the go-to kind of tempo setter for them. So that'll change things on the offensive end, but it'll demand, they need to get after them. I think in the tight they need big performances, stand-up performances from guys like Aldrit, guys like Vito, who's been great.
Two of them have been brilliant.
They have been brilliant sources of go-forward ball and of good quality offloading and kind of getting in behind.
Priso as well.
Danny Priso's been brilliant in the race, to be fair. Absolutely. So those kinds of guys are going to need to have massive performances to try and get it through or around this Leinster defence. You've got to think it's about winning a contact and getting an offload, and then you might be in behind.
I think you're right. I think you were talking about the tail end of the Racing game just being physical. I think like Ronan O'Gara will be thinking, where were we impressive in the semi-final? Where are we most impressive?
Where do we match up best against this Leinster side?
It's in the tight. Yeah. It's in the tight five. It's in those areas. Like Leinster's defense is absolutely brilliant. They bring a lot of pressure. They have guys like calendar and Josh van der Veer coming flying out of the line.
And then if you get out even wider, Robbie Henshaw.
And to be fair, like Robbie Henshaw and Gary Ringrose at the moment are not being messed with. I actually don't think you're winning it out there. I think you're much more likely sending your big men down narrow channels if you can get a bit of tempo and a bit of rhythm going. Leinster give you the ball. Leinster aren't a jackling team. I mean, they really aren't. They have precious few turnovers.
What they do is not commit to rucks. That's what they've been doing for the last few seasons, is actually just evacuate the ruck area as quickly as possible, because you're not going to get pinned for not rolling, back on your feet, back in the line, and then when you have Hugo Keenan back in fullback, you kind of cover all the space.
Exactly, The kicking game is a non-runner unless you can really back your quality of a guy like Dylan Lades to just outmatch Hugo Keenan. I don't particularly love the matchup there. Where I like the matchup is in the tight, is literally you get your Retier or whoever's playing 9 just round the corner. We're going to win contacts, we're going to have latchers, it's going to be rhythmic, it's going to be ugly, but we're going to keep going round the corner, and you want James Ryan and these Leinster forwards who are very, very good, but not the biggest in the world, to be feeling their weight constantly and moving backwards. And then all of a sudden, the energy that Leinster have been bringing on defence might just wilt a little bit.
Yeah, or just you'll get a soft shoulder and one of these little offloads, Victor Vito around the back, and then you're in behind, and then a try could come from that, because the system isn't going to break unless you just get the line break through with your physicality and with a touch of class here and there. But be selective with that. The latter part, the offloading, because a repeat of what they were doing in the semi-final will lead to a cricket score if they're just turfing balls randomly for Leinster to gobble up and transition with. That's like win
those contacts. So that is the blueprint. It's a mammoth task. Leinster are very good, and they will lose some plays. Guys like Dan Sheehan, like Toulouse, trying to play some red zone offense, and all of a sudden Dan Sheehan picked up one of their men and drove him back halfway up the field. Like, those superlative plays do come out of the Leinster's dynamic pack. It's not an easy task beating them up front, but it is probably their best course. Where they match up legitimately better potentially is in the scrum, and that's an area they
depends
really
on the personnel for sure. Like Antonio,
they
will want Antonio there, but they'll Priso get after whoever's a tight head, if it's
or even if it's Tadhg Furlong. I mean, Leinster's scrum has been middle of the pack this year. It really hasn't been any better than that.
No, it's true, and even Porter has come back a little bit.
He's not the force he once was.
This is also true. There's definitely chinks. As much as there are two absolutely great hookers who do rotate, there are chinks in that front row. They're slightly light in the lock, to be honest, since Scott Fardy disappeared from the mix for them. They're a little bit light in the second row, in the engine room, in the young players. There's a lot of young locks coming through, but they are just a little bit rangier, and they're not quite your kind of massive pillars of men. They're not an Eben Etzebeth among them, so that in terms of that, so they're very good ball players, but that's the point of difference that La Rochelle will have, is just weight and heft in that area, and they'll look to try and do that and to put the squeeze on in the set piece. That involves some drop balls as well. Like, the pressure defense has got to create those. If Leinster start dropping balls, and then you can get the squeeze on at scrum time, and then you can turn those penalties and turn it into a slow paced game, a kind of game with the ball in play only when you want it to be, and only on your terms. You certainly don't want a repeat of what Leinster managed to do to Toulouse, which I think the ball in play time was like 40 minutes.
Yeah, correct.
The average one in the top couture, which I think it was actually Hugo Molla was citing that in his post match interview was saying that the average time in the top couture was around 30-32 minutes, which is pretty high a lot in some contexts, but 40 minutes is just very, very tough to live with. If you allow Leinster to set that tempo, that's probably going to be due.
And especially if you've the weight of your pack. So absolutely, penalties, slowing it down, trusting your offensive maul, because there have been chinks in what Leinster are doing, but not over,
because their place kicking is going to have to be improved anyway. It's a cup final, all points matter, but like, maybe if they're on the angle or something, just go to the corner and trust your maul and go after them and work an easier.
I think so. I think the maul is a real potential for them, looking at what happened against Leicester. Just not overplaying your hand. If Leinster's goal line defense is resilient, you will need to take threes and chink at the scoreline.
True.
But there is a blueprint there for La Rochelle. There are things to work with. They will be looking strong. They will be looking deeply at all of those options in terms of ways to break Leinster down.
They'll also be kind of looking back at them last year, and obviously it's a different challenge that Leinster will face this year. But they're in Marseille. They're on French soil. They beat this team by 9 points last time they played them, so let's go. No reason for them to not be confident going in.
And the dynamics for La Rochelle finding a way to beat Leinster. The dynamics for Leinster are slightly different in that, the game plan is out in the open. There's no mystery to it. It's just it's got that sort of all black vibe of come and beat us if you can.
Yeah. Well, the other thing they'll cite, obviously I've heard a few interviews with a few of the lads, and they have been citing the La Rochelle game last year and the Saracens defeat in the final the year before. But the one that would actually worry me more, although they actually won the game, was when they got that fourth star, and it was against Racing, because that was a year again where they looked the best team. They did, and they ultimately did win the final. But in the final, they did not play their game. They actually played a scrappy game against a team that were able for it, and ended up having to rely on one or two kicks to get over the line. I don't think I would like to see a repeat of that, especially against this team that beat them last year, La Rochelle. I would like, for Leinster, the trappings are to tighten up that little bit in cup final mode, and then you're actually marching to the wrong tune.
When the A team have been playing, the main guys, it's been all kind of blowout victories. It's been all just getting on top of the team.
We haven't seen them behind yet. Yes, that's true. Apart from against Toulouse, actually briefly, when they did throw that pick.
Yeah, indeed, and they reacted very well to that. But they were just dominating that game from minute one. And that's been the story. I mean, they have been so dominant in all of their performances. We haven't really seen what it looks like for this team to be out of sorts and for it to be scrappy. I think the closest was probably the away game in the sports ground, which is obviously played at a lower level.
That's true.
That was a scrap.
Yeah.
But ultimately they were able to get enough done on the offense, and that would be the hope. But I mean, I would assume they want to play their game. They're brilliant offense.
It's got them this far. Yeah. Why would you want to deviate from it?
The only concern you'd have would be the potential for the jackal threats to scupper them. The potential for, like, Toulouse in one or two moments got the best of Leinster. Like, one or two moments they got the read on the pullback pass. Leinster don't want to telegraph that. They want to keep their options as sharp as they can be. And they never look as sharp as when they're in the Aviva Stadium. That much is for sure.
That much is true, and they aren't there in Marseille, so that's going to be a point of difference.
Are they going to tighten up and focus a little bit more on ball protection and put maybe one or two forwards into most rucks, and then just sacrifice an option to do that? And how much does that change the dynamics of what they're trying to do vis-a-vis occupying the defence? That's a question.
It remains to be seen. It depends how effective La Rochelle are at the read, at the tackle, and then at the breakdown, which they're all going to be like. They know they're going to come at them in those areas. So it depends how, if the deception of what they're doing, and if they can be accurate with it, is enough to just do what they did, like what they did to Toulouse. I don't expect that they're expecting a challenge like what Toulouse gave, because I think even Sexton was citing it, like, I felt like Munster did them a favour, or did half the work for them in that game, because it felt like they were in championship mode, and they know Toulouse, and they didn't feel like that was quite them at their A game. Whereas this La Rochelle side, you'd expect, especially after a Scull-3 performance in the semi, you'd expect them to come out galvanised.
Well, not to mention 2 defeats in finals last year. I mean, that really,
that's going to be
as much as Leinster have bone to pick with the defeat to La Rochelle last year, for Ronan O'Gara, like, to have been in 2 finals already as a head coach, and to be staring down the barrel of a third one where he might go 0-3 in finals and start getting a positively Clermont record. That's something that they'd be desperate to avoid. So I think we have to expect them at their best, them at their most physical and dynamic. And that's the intrigue is how they're going to get after Leinster and how Leinster can exploit it. I mean, the beautiful thing about how we've been playing at the moment is that the multiple options can make fools of teams trying to make a read, trying to get the read on Sexton.
Kicking it to Dupont, notwithstanding, this Leinster side do work the short side very, very well, even when they're numbered up on the outside, and so being deceptive with that and kind of isolating teams, try and force them to make folding decisions. Should I fold or should I not fold? And then paralysing the forwards who want to be jackling, but they don't really know where the ball is.
Exactly.
That's exactly the level of just subterfuge and distraction that this Leinster offense is built on.
What Sexton and Gibson Park have been so good at doing is getting, and particularly Sexton, I mean, it's hard to put your finger on why, apart from just sort of the aggressive personality and the sort of veteran smarts that he has, but nobody is in shape as quickly when he's not on the field.
It's true.
And it's like as soon as Ross Byrne comes on, everybody just slows down a little bit.
I think it was a compliment that Luke Fitzgerald, who's a long time out of the game now, or like quite a while out of the game, but he's played with Sexton a fair bit, and that was one of the big compliments he talked about, was his spacing, his ability to get the back line just spaced accurately and correctly.
Yeah.
It's an unsung skill for every 10 to do a lot of the time, but he's very, very good at that, and probably because of his shrill barking of orders, probably not, doesn't help.
He knows what he wants, and he's the quarterback on the field, and everyone else's job is to get where Sexton wants them to be and present them with the ball. But the speed at which they fold is the undoing of the jackal threat. It's the question of whether or not they win a contact. There's an instant clean out. Gibson Park's there instantly, and as soon as he picks it up, the shape is there, and all of a sudden then La Rochelle are chasing shadows. They don't really know where to go, and then when you do what I said they should do and shoot up on Sexton, if the timing on that is just slightly off, Sexton's going to dump it off to his outside option number one, who's going to run right in the space you left behind. They're going to get that one runner in there, straight back into shape again, and be going again. You'll be chasing shadows. That's the glory of what Leinster are doing with the ball again at the moment, and that's what they're going to be trying to bring.
Exactly what I hope to see as well. Yes, obviously challenges forthcoming in the scrum, and they'll want their line-out darts to be accurate, which towards the tail end of this season they have tidied up. They had some issues on their own ball, but they've actually tidied up statistically on the line-out as well.
Undoubtedly an area that La Rochelle are going to come at them, because La Rochelle are thinking how we could Leinster's offense and defense is excellent, but we could flip the script on them by taking both of their set pieces away.
Indeed.
And that's going to be like a huge point of focus for Leinster in terms of just getting what they're doing right in the scrum. Like there were weird moments against Toulouse, like they were out of sync with one another. There was one penalty that was given away immediately after Alatoa came on the field, and Cyril Bai got a penalty against him, but it was Andrew Porter's fault, because he tried to be really aggressive on his man Aldegheri, and he went for like sort of an extra push to try and get after Aldegheri. Aldegheri is like rock solid. He just wasn't going to be moved from his kind of set square position, but he could take a step backwards. But what Porter ended up doing was shifting the whole scrum a little bit to the left and just putting both Cyril Bai and Julian Marchand right onto Alatoa, and Alatoa just went backwards at a rate of knots. Just the pressure just couldn't cope with, ended up buckling, penalty Toulouse, and that was actually where one of their few scores came from.
True.
Was just an error from Andrew Porter. So like little moments like that, like that's just like that's
points for,
but that's like naive. It's like, what are we actually trying to do here? Like, well, why is Porter having a dig there when it's not really on? They need to be 100% in sync with one another. And the mission statement for this Leinster team that backs themselves in open play is not to go hunting scrum penalties. It's to secure a solid,
your own ball
scrum.
Secure your own ball, contain strong, the La Rochelle scrum that's going to come after them, but secure your own ball in and out. Also pressure their line out, because James Ryan has been nicking a few, as has Ross Maloney. They're athletic, get up there and pressure their line out on the defensive end, and create turnovers, because like La Rochelle, their KBA approach, which they won't abandon entirely, you saw the folly of it sometimes in that semi-final in terms of how loose they are. Leinster in transition are very dangerous. They can put them under that kind of pressure and force speculative offloads from them, or balls to deck, target the ball in contact as well, because they're looking for that offload, just big swinging arm, try and generate some chaos ball and turn it over. They did it to Toulouse a few times, and it generates good scores for them, because they'll feel confident in their ability to fold into shape on transition, and they have great backfield strike runners.
If Leinster can get up and hard on the inside on the La Rochelle carriers, the sort of the initial pod of forwards, and disrupt them and consistently stop them at source in that area, as in just don't go backwards at a rate of knots. If Daragh and Josh and co are coming up, wrapping the ball, just slowing everything up and getting a decent tackle off, I don't actually think that La Rochelle have the firepower in terms of first phase strike moves, or just the quality of sort of like Ehia West. It doesn't really have the magic to unpick a defense with like a really wide killer pass.
And they're missing their halfback.
It takes phases. Well, Red Gears is solid.
Red Gears is a good halfback.
But it'll take phases. It'll take phases and consistent momentum to get La Rochelle to actually threaten the Leinster defence. So if they can scupper them on the inside, I don't see La Rochelle having too much in the way of the killer offence to actually unstick Leinster on the edge. I think they have to win it on the inside, and hence that's where Leinster really have to win it as well on the defensive end. They've been great at bringing pressure. They've forced offloads. Even the likes of Cyril Bai, who sits down one or two men every time, wasn't getting too much purchase, and if you can rein that guy in, you can rein what La Rochelle are bringing in as well. But it was an opus performance from the Leinster defence against Toulouse. It will need to be similar.
Yes, this is it. There's no if it's diminished at all, that's when you invite the big French side in on French soil. But that is forthcoming not this weekend, next weekend in Montpellier. It's the Stade Velodrome in Marseille, I should say. Referee is going to be Monsieur Barnes for this one, the only Englishman at the point. Great call as well. Indeed, no problem with it at all. Excited to see him take this. Actually, I've kind of haven't seen him as much with the whistle these days. But he's going to be taking this. It's going to be box office. It's Ireland v France. It's Leinster v La Rochelle. It's Rog v Leinster v Sexton as well. It's got all kinds of colour to it. Leinster are favourites going in, and they're certainly our favourites as well. But do not write off the French team.
How are you seeing it going? What's your call?
Oh, I'm gonna lean with the favourites tag and say that Leinster get it done.
What kind of game are you picturing?
I'm picturing a little tight at times. I think La Rochelle will cause us some problems. I think we might be a little inaccurate in certain sequences. We might try and force the pass once or twice, but I do think we will find scores, and I think our defence will probably be telling in terms of. I don't think La Rochelle will find quite as many. I think there'll be 1 or 2 tries, maybe even 3 tries for Leinster and 1 or possibly 2 for La Rochelle.
If the La Rochelle tries come, they'll come from penalties, then kicks to the corner, then pressure, then physicality.
Now, what'll worry me is if it's a stop-start game that's kind of 3-6 and 3-all, 3-all, 6-all, 6-all. Then you're in a scrappy cup final and anything could happen. But if Leinster manage to set the tempo, I think we win.
If they keep playing their game, that was what they did against all of these teams in Connacht in the sports ground. When they were under pressure, they just kept stuck to their rhythms, and eventually a defensive cog was misplaced on the opposition end, and in they ran someone like James Lowe, who'll finish once they get the line breaks. I think they're dangerous enough. I think
that's probably a better bet, because you're not getting odds on Leinster at all. But James Lowe to score a try, I don't know if you're going to get much odds on that either, because he's been doing it every game.
I mean, that's the key. Leinster, if they can just stick to that offense and keep playing their game and not recede into crazy cup final mode and make it a flip of a coin, they should have enough, even against a very impressive game wily La Rochelle team. I think Leinster should have
another factor in this is obviously there's a week of domestic action beforehand, and La Rochelle, unlike Leinster's B team, managed to go to South Africa and secure top spot, so they can rest. They have a game against Munster, but they will not send any of their championship starters out, whereas La Rochelle are right on the precipice of the barrage. So those guys, whoever's although they are with a few injuries, and to be fair, both teams are with a few injuries, you don't get to a cup final in a campaign like this without a few injuries. That your squad needs to carry you through. But La Rochelle will have a very competitive game this weekend coming, and then have to get up further.
That is always a dynamic.
It is.
The French team, they did have a win in Europe last year. They
routinely perform. Toulouse
are
top of the table and in cup finals, and doing doubles.
Real, the French teams are dominating Europe. Just it's French teams and Leinster. They're managing, they're coping with that workload really well. It's nothing new for them, and I don't expect them to be diminished truly for it, barring any major injuries. But I do think, if I'm predicting the game, I'm hoping to see Leinster's offense that has been so good this year, that's going to rock up in green to New Zealand and hope to win on New Zealand's soil against the All Blacks this summer. And if you want to be doing that, you want to be maintaining that excellent standard that they've set for themselves, you should be able to unstick this good but not world-class La Rochelle defence on enough occasions to get enough scores to win the game, to hopefully claim a 5th star.
I would agree with all of that. So
I'm going to be there. I'm going to be down in Marseille.
4:45 in the Stade Velodrome. He's going to be there in Marseille. A few other family. I'm not. I'm going to be working annoyingly, but I'm going to still be watching it. Where are you going to be watching it from? Let us know in the comments down below. And who you got? Are you fancying a punt against the curve and going for La Rochelle on the upset, or are you going with the masses and with ourselves and saying Leinster are going to get that 5th star? Let us know down below in the comments. But with that, I think we're going to move on.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for tuning into the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you're new here, please do like and subscribe and ring the bell as well, so you'll be notified when we upload. But mainly drop a comment down below as well. We love hearing your thoughts on the rugby. Cheers.